We begin this morning with the new webpage Governor Beshear has launched, listing fiscal notes for various bills moving through the General Assembly this year. A fiscal note is legalese for the dollar estimate to implement some of these proposals. A spokesperson for the governor's office says this is the same information that is provided to the Legislative Research Commission, a nonpartisan agency in state government that also prepares fiscal notes. The site has progressively grown throughout the week from 37 bills on Monday to over 50 listed as of Friday.
And in the past, we've been asked by the General Assembly, by LRC, to create a fiscal note, which we do, and we do it on behalf of the people of Kentucky. And we've provided to the legislature only to have it not posted, sometimes not even shared with committee members or other members of the legislature.
Beshear argues that this has led to bills being passed without a fiscal note posted and no money being appropriated for that. We can discuss some specific ones here in just a second. I want to start with you here, Representative Camuel. What are your thoughts generally about rolling something out like this and how it may affect the relationship with the General Assembly?
For me, I think that the fiscal note site, I think it's actually very helpful, and it aids us in transparency. As legislators, whenever we are proposing legislation, we sometimes have to request a fiscal note, if it's a mandate, if there's a corrections impact. And so what this does is it just makes public the information that I think taxpayers need. I also think it's information that we as legislators need. We need to know what legislation is going to cost us and how it's being funded, and the taxpayers need to know that as well.
Senator Funke, Frommeyer, same question to you. How do you think this approach affects the relationship with the General Assembly?
Well, it's interesting. You're often, you appreciate a heads up, if I can be so slang. And I was a bit surprised because my first introduction to the governor's approach happened at 8:05 a.m. and my priorities are wellness, economic development, and energy. So here I go to present the freestanding birthing centers at the Health Committee at 8:30 a.m. and at 8:05 I receive an email with a notice of a financial impact. That's frustrating. So how accurate is that information? I felt like absolutely transparency is essential. But on this particular bill, this has been 5 years that we've been working, improving, refining, and not once in 5 years has there ever been a suggested financial impact. But then at 8:05, the morning that I'm going to present this in committee, a fiscal note was applied. So how accurate would you believe that is if you were a consumer, a taxpayer, a Kentuckian that is counting on perhaps the site that the governor presented to us to be accurate?
One question I think I have, and maybe a lot of folks have, is that it seems that there's now 2 agencies presenting these sets of numbers, and I'm curious what other questions y'all might have as well. But what you're mentioning here with your particular bill, I'm curious if the LRC gave you a different set of numbers, or if there was a discrepancy between the governor's numbers and LRC numbers, what factors would you consider in terms of who's more accurate?
That's a meaningful question relative to the Legislative Research Commission is a nonpartisan group. And we have counted on them to produce this information, and they take a very meaningful process to reach out to the associated cabinet. So the Cabinet for Health and Family Services would have provided that information to me had there been expected a fiscal note. When in fact, if you're talking about a freestanding birthing center, the birth is going to happen. Whether it happens at a hospital, home, or in a freestanding birthing center, it would be a savings. So where did a $400,000 fiscal note come from? And it comes back to the question, what was it based on? None of that information was provided to me, the bill sponsor. So that becomes very oppositional. It's difficult to state it any other way. Very oppositional.
I'll let you come in here,
Sure.
Ms. Camuel.
And I actually appreciate what Senator Funke Frommeyer is saying, and I can understand the frustration of that happening on the day of presenting a bill. Like my hope is always for timeliness. But I think last year, if we think back, we had a couple of pieces of legislation where the fiscal notes were kind of done in secret and then not released to the public. And my goal is to always make sure that we, as members of the legislature and one of the 3 branches of government, that we're doing the things that we are supposed to to make sure that the public is fully informed about what's happening. But timeliness is important, and I will say, like, I understand the frustration on that.
Yeah.
But if there's a fiscal note that we didn't, on a piece of legislation that we didn't know we needed, I would definitely like to know before that goes into, before it's enacted, before legislation's enacted.
We have a little less than a minute left here before we move on, but I want to get both of y'all's thoughts on how something like this may compare to the national effort we're seeing with you may want to laugh or not, but the DOGE effort, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, and the increased focus on transparency at the national level. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I have great respect for efficiency and would like that to be addressed even with a higher degree of diligence in Frankfurt and nationally, but especially in Frankfurt. So yes, I'm very appreciative that we want to identify what are the real costs associated with this. So I do appreciate that thoughtfulness behind. Let's be efficient, let's be effective. These are the taxpayers' dollars. These are the people's dollars, not ours. We've got to be sensible about how we're spending other people's money.
And the last word from you,
Sure.
Camuel?
I appreciate it. And efficiency, I think, is a wonderful thing, but I also think that we have to be very careful in how we approach that people who are really embedded in a specific department or an area, that they have a say or a voice to explain why the government funds certain things or why they do things. I think the way that sort of what we've seen with the slash and burn with the DOGE is creating a lot of fear and insecurity in a lot of people around, not just in Kentucky, but around the country, looking at the impact of schools, looking at SNAP benefits, Medicare, Medicaid. Meeting people's basic needs. I think there's a lot of fear that has created.
We're going to have to see how the dust settles, but we'll have to leave it right there.